So, Colin, we are being joined now by Senator Irwin.
Hello, everyone. Oh, okay. Seeing who's all in here.
Nice
to see many of you again. Sorry if my camera or audio is not ideal, but my laptop is it's just not a very capable machine, so I'm joining on my phone today.
Thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate it a lot. We just got a couple things we definitely want to talk about. And
can you turn your phone to the side though and go landscape mode?
Wow.
Now a little readjustment. Maybe the
classic. There you go. Yeah. The smile works though. All right, Senator Irwin. So thank you very much for joining us. I think you basically know everybody on this panel. We are joined in addition by Jenny Lindemann, who's done a lot of great work in Flushing Township and other places, working against prohibitive ordinances and things like that. And we're going to talk with her about that a little bit more later on in the show. But she's bringing some good energy to our community.
Great.
So there's a fundraiser coming up for you and for your second term of being senator, and that means that your campaign started, and that's definitely one of the things we kind of want to talk about is you're starting your mission to get reelected.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, obviously, thank you for an opening to make a pitch for my own campaign. But yeah, I have been really honored to serve the people of the 18th district here in Washtenaw County, representing communities like Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti and this, Ypsilanti Township and Pittsfield Township and Salame and York Township and Milan and Augusta Township, Superior Township and Salem Township. It's been a great opportunity and a real honor. And, I am going to be running for re-election next year. We're most of the way through my first term, which has been a very interesting one, given all of the events that I didn't expect to encounter along my way. There are a number of things I think that those of us who are on this call share in terms of our interest in wanting to further the drug policy reform we've had a lot of success with here in Michigan in recent years, to make sure that some of the changes that we made in 2018 that were so historic are protected, and that we continue to grow on those wins. And also on a wide range of other issues. There are a lot of issues that initially got me involved in politics, like how is it that we're treating our fellow human beings? Are we making sure that people have enough to eat and a roof over their heads, and that they're able to go to a doctor when they need to, or they're able to seek mental health care? What are we doing to educate the next generation and make sure that we protect clean air and clean water? These are issues. These are the things that I think about all the time. And so to be able to work on them professionally is a tremendous honor. And so part of that process of trying to serve as an elected official is to put your name out there, put your name on the ballot, and also to ask other people to support you in that effort. So if folks are able to support me in running for re-election, I'd encourage you to go to irwinforsenate.com and follow the link to donate and help me, because I do need support to get back to Lansing. I do need folks who support the kinds of things that I'm pushing for in Lansing to say to their friends and neighbors in Washtenaw County, you should vote for Jeff Irwin, and to also help me financially if that's something that you're able to do.
Right on. So, and then there's a fundraiser coming up that there's information on just this week. There's information on that on my page, being circulated around social media and stuff like that. So if you're interested in helping out and joining us for a gathering, then that would be a good opportunity too, besides just going to the site and donating. Of course, at any time, feel free to fill us in on whatever you find to be of interest to us and information that we might knowing, but I'm sure you're familiar with the kind of controversy / boycott of Michigan Cannabis Manufacturing Association companies and their attempt to pitch significant law changes that would peel back existing rights and create burdens for caregivers and make it more difficult for small businesses to flourish. And just any thoughts on that, or any insight on that, and then any legislation that's floating around that might have traction that would be of concern or interest to us.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that we've talked about before, Jamie. I think one of the things that I've remarked from the stage at Hash Bash, going back to before we were able to be successful with legalization and then extending afterwards. We do need to be vigilant in making sure that we protect this law against changes that are going to be bad for our rights, bad for consumers, or that are going to, allow a narrow group of people to erect a walled garden around their business interests. I mean, we need to create a system where people need to compete fairly for their customers, where people need to provide a good product, just like in any other setting, right? We know that cannabis is going to be regulated. It's going to be maybe even highly regulated. It's sort of like alcohol, as we said during the campaign. And so there are going to be some rules, and there are going to be some rules out there that will, arguably favor someone over another. But we need to be very careful about each one of those rules to make sure that they're not, once again, creating some sort of unfair competitive advantage. We need to make sure that the interests of the consumers are kept in the forefront. So yeah, that's all true. I think that there are folks who have engaged the legislature and asked for different changes. But I think that each one of those different companies that are parts of different associations, whether it's that one or another one, they all have different opinions and interests as well. And so as a legislator, one of the things that's very interesting to me is being able to hear the different shades of what it is that these companies are interested in. And first and foremost, I think they're just interested in continuing to be able to do business here in the state of Michigan. And that's something, as an advocate of legalization, I don't have a problem with that aspect of their interests. But to your point, like in every other regulated industry, whether it's beer and wine or whether it's utilities or healthcare or anything else, there are always these ideas that come forward that might be negative for consumers. And one of the ones that I think I've been hearing coming up time and time again, and that I've been trying to sound the alarm about, and many of these opportunities I've had to join you and others on these podcasts, is just efforts to change and increase the tax. Increase is pretty straightforward. There are folks out there who say, look, Michigan's excise tax is only 10%. Maybe it should be 15%. Maybe it should be 20%. Maybe it should be in line with Colorado's. Maybe it should be in line with, some other states. And then there are also folks who want to change the distribution of that tax. And when we designed Proposal 1, there were, I think there was an effort to make the tax allocation straightforward and, in line with something that the voters could understand and support. And so what we did is we split that tax revenue up 35% to K-12 schools, 35% to repair roads and bridges, and 30% to the local governments who house cannabis retail facilities. And so, I think that makes sense to people, and I think we should keep it that way. Certainly in the near term, all of these efforts to, change that distribution and, you take away some of the money from K-12 or take away some of the money from local governments and give it to, often I hear the suggestion is law enforcement, are not efforts that I'm supportive of. I know that the people in my district aren't exactly clamoring for a refund the police effort. That's not what I get in my email inbox. Those are the kinds of things that I hear about most in Lansing, getting the most traction. I do think that, we definitely have heard folks say that going all the way back to before the passage of the MMFLA, we heard folks say, let's ban caregivers. I've never thought that there are votes for that. But one of the things that I've been encouraging, going once again way back to 2016 when we were talking about the MMFLA, was let's of course not ban caregivers. The voters created caregivers in the MMMA, and they need to be protected. And there are a lot of folks out there who have bona fide medical needs and who need to access to that opportunity. But I also think that the legal market would benefit, and the medical marijuana market would benefit from allowing caregivers, if they wanted to get a license and sell their overages into the legal system. I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think that it would, that might be a way to bridge the gap and, really give caregivers who might have a unexpectedly large crop, or who might want to have an expectedly large crop, to be able to count on that outlet into the legal market for that product. So that's those are some of my thoughts on some of the various attacks that I've been hearing coming up, and some of the other ideas that at least I've been trying to put out there since 2016, because I just think that in the long run, what's going to be best for all parties involved, and particularly for consumers, is to make the legal market work, and make it work well, and make it rational from a price and supply standpoint for folks to go through that route. And right now, the way it's set up with some of the, really breathless and over the top rules that we require, it is hard for some of those folks to compete with folks who aren't following those rules.
Excellent. And I appreciate that idea of kind of reincorporating the caregivers into the system. That's small grows in Oklahoma are a thing, and they work out really well. They just have to meet the standards, of the commercial marketplace. And if they do, and they paid their nominal licensing fee, they can introduce their product to the market. And a lot of caregivers would then provide quality and diversity to this market, and that would be useful right now. So Adam Brook wants to know best way to contact your representative or senator, email, telephone call, in-person visit?
Well, there's a couple different answers to this. And, I guess the first one is just that it depends. I mean, every legislator is a little different. We're all people. Some people respond differently to different approaches. I would also point out that sometimes it also depends on a generational effect, right? So in general, I find that legislators who are maybe older than me tend to respond to phone calls a little more and better, or more quickly, and less so to emails, whereas I think folks who are a little bit younger than me tend to respond more to the emails and less rapidly to the telephone calls. But really, the best of all is in person. And, I would encourage everybody to, consider going to, town halls, or going to, coffee hours, or going to other events where their legislators or their other elected officials are going to be, to, ask them questions about the issues you care about, whatever that might be. And, given the subject of this show, ask them questions about cannabis laws, and ask them questions about, what they think about either the state of the laws we were just talking about a moment ago, or what they think about some of the folks who still are in prison for crimes that were fundamentally about, cannabis. What about, some of these other drug policy reform issues that are important to at least myself, right? Like, I'm getting ready to introduce a law to decriminalize entheogenic plants. It would be great to get more lawmakers just to get on the record on that issue. Do they think that people ought to go to jail for using those substances or not? And just having those questions asked especially in person in a public setting, I think has a real impact on just encouraging people to reckon with these questions. A lot of the I think problem we have in changing some of these laws, particularly around drug policy reform, is that we're stuck in a certain way here in America. We've got a certain inertia given the war on drugs, and knocking people out of that by getting them to think about what it could look like under a different regime is important. That's an important part of the change process.
Hey, so I'm going to get to a question from Cindy Godfrey in a minute about the definition changes concerning the Delta 8 thing in a second. But before that, we have Josey Scoggin joining us from Sons and Daughters United, and from a new organization, Great Lakes Expungement Network. Now, an awesome set of bills to help out with expungement issues passed in last session. But cannabis kind of got the short end of the stick, if you may agree. And I know that you were working very heavily on trying to get some of the changes in that would make that not the case, and make it a little bit more sensible and along the lines I think of what a lot of us would have expected. And Josey is heading up a lot of the work in this new organization that helps people out with expungements, Great Lakes Expungement Network. And already we've run into some issues based on the existing laws with trying to help some people out that don't seem to make a lot of sense. In the Michigan Cannabis Freedom Coalition, the policy committee, we are looking at trying to ask people to help with modifying that law to get more to how you were presenting it last session, and other things possibly. Some things being automatic, including felonies. More of the activities that would be eligible, for expungement. Not having maybe the automatic expungements on some activity would help out, but there's this period of time that has to pass without any other incidents taking place and things like that. And anyway, Josey, I think, has dealt with this head on. And so I'd like for her to describe, like an issue or some issues that she's seen with this and just get your response on it. And see if you think there's anything we can do.
I'm so excited to be here with the greats. I'm so happy. And I was just
Josey, I'm excited to see you. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm excited to see you.
Man, I texted Jamie and I was like, why is Jeff Irwin so cool? And then he just kept saying cooler things. I was so excited about it. When we started the Great Lake Expungement Network, it was all about taking full advantage of these great, fantastic clean slate bills, which are 6 different bills, which I think is confusing for a lot of people. They issued the new forms on April 11th or April 9th, and they were to go into effect on April 11th. These forms are making people attest that no crimes have been committed in the time between today's date and the date that they ended their sentencing. So what that means is if you have a brother who has a felony from 92 for growing pot in his driveway, and then maybe he drove on a suspended license 2 times, and then maybe he got a DUI in 2014. So I'll never be able to expunge anything on this guy's record because
she's so good. I feel like she's still talking. I can hear her in my head. Just go for it, Josey.
Oh.
Well, I'm going to be eager to get the full download on exactly that form and get my hands on it, because it sounded like she had her finger on maybe a way that we could change the form so that they're not holding people back.
Man, I get good. I just get passionate about it, and they kick me right off. But what we're seeing is people are ineligible for 3 different reasons for the most part. And when we started it, we really didn't know what our goal was, right? Are we looking to expunge people's records, or are we looking to find out if they're eligible and walk them through the process? And so that's 2 very different things when we're talking about how much time we're dealing with clients. And so we decided it's way too hard to find information as it is, and that we want to be at least a one-stop shop to see if you're eligible, to connect you with attorneys, to connect you with free expungement resources. While we were doing this, we've also been collecting the data on people who are not eligible and why they're not eligible. And for 2 reasons. Number one, because we have people like Jeff Irwin on our side who are dedicated to real, substantial change and to bettering the life of Michiganders. And we all know Jeff loves Michigan.
Oh, no.
But we do know Jeff loves Michigan. She's so right about that.
We do. We can disappoint the point here a little bit too. I mean, you understand there's some issues. She's going to come back on and continue, but there are some issues that might be able to be fixed that are getting in the way. I think ultimately that's her question, but here we go.
Damn. All right. I'm just going straight to the data points now. We're seeing that people are validated based on DUIs. First-time DUIs are act as a roadblock, but that would not be a roadblock if this waiting period, this clean record requirement, we allowed people to expunge things that were on their record if there had been 7 years clean period. So I'm agreeing with the fact that they should show that they are rehabilitated or that they're staying out of trouble. But that's not the only requirement. So if you have if you haven't reoffended in 20 years, but your last offense is a DUI or an inexpungible offense, I'll never be able to expunge anything, even if there's something like felony marijuana or marijuana illegal transport. And so when Jamie says that marijuana has gotten the poor end of the stick. It's not necessarily true. They didn't get what we feel they deserve, but all of the expungement bills kind of fell short due to this waiting period, due to this clean record requirement. We have a guy in the UP who is 66 years old. His only offense ever was growing weed in 2013. A lot of weed, but still. And he totally was eligible for expungement. Came to me in January. It was like, yeah, we don't know how the laws are going to play out. Let's wait till it forms in April. They hit us with this clean record requirement saying that he cannot have any charges between today's date and the end of his sentencing. But in the middle of the pandemic in 2020, he was driving on without any insurance in his car. So he has to wait 5 years to be eligible for expungement because of this poverty crime. And that's what a lot of people's crimes are, right? They're not, hey, I'm a bad guy.
Poverty crimes really are a real thing. And I know exactly what she's talking about. I know you do too, Jeff.
Yeah, we need to decriminalize poverty, and we know, that a lot of times these driving without insurance or driving without license suspended crimes are often just times as a result of someone being unable to pay fines, and it stacks up. And one of the things I think though a lot of people don't know is just to what extent our district courts are funded by fines on poor people.
If you go sit in on a district court day, it's like just a giant cash register.
Right. Hey, Senator Irwin, I'm curious, this waiting period, this clean record period, is that common throughout the entire expungement bill package, or is that something only applied to cannabis abuse?
Well, it is common throughout the entire package, although I think maybe a more accurate way to say it would be that, as was mentioned earlier, there were a handful of different bills. And one of the bills is the Clean Slate bill. And that's the bill that basically says that if you go for this period of time without reoffending and your crimes were not violent in the first place and weren't on this prohibited list like DUI and a couple others that maybe shouldn't be on the list. But nonetheless, that's what it said. If you go this period of time without reoffending, then your record can be clear. There was a separate bill that dealt specifically with cannabis. And what that bill did is that bill said that if your crime was use or possession, then you were going to be eligible to get that expunged without regard to the number, and that you had to apply, and that your expungement would be granted unless the prosecutor challenged your request and the judge ruled that there was a valid determination that you shouldn't get your expungement for some reason that was articulable by the whole team there. So in general, what that bill said is that if you have a use or possession crime, you're going to get your that expunged. So out of all the people that I could find during my research that were in the state criminal database for cannabis crimes, there were about 235,000 people who had crimes for use or simple possession. There were another, I think, 25,000 people who had crimes on their record for possession with intent to deliver. That was not covered by the specific cannabis-related bill, but it does fall under the previous Clean Slate bill and is covered by that waiting period. Same with manufacture. And the argument that I attempted to make during the passage of the specific cannabis bill was that, well, look, the idea here that this bill was introduced under and that was passed under in the House was that, things that are now legal under Proposal 1 should be expungible. And, it is now legal, it's strictly legal to grow. And so, that seems, like a right that has been granted by Proposal 1. It should clearly be included in the sort of more or less automatic version, but it wasn't. And possession with intent to deliver, I would point out that there are plenty of people right now who are delivering cannabis in Michigan and making a license and are making the money off of it and are licensed by the state to do so. And so I think they should have been included as well. But as I think everyone on this call knows, they were not ultimately included.
It was some technical wording that excludes them. It excludes, all the activity. The issue, part of the issue is the fact that without remuneration, is allowed if it transfers between adults 21 and over 2.5 ounces or less, and that the transactions that took place before were based at a time when there was no discussion of money, whether it was specifically prohibited or not. All they had to do was transfer it, whether or not money exchanged hands, and that was the crime. Now that transfer is legal, so it's an attempt to keep these things down. Like, this is the issue that we have with cannabis at large.
I made that specific argument as well, that, look, there are plenty of people who got possession with intent to deliver who actually weren't delivering. There are also plenty of people who got possession with intent to deliver that were delivering without remuneration. But, and none of these arguments were able to win the day in our current conservative legislature. And, what we ended up with, though, is actually, I think, a pretty good result overall for, people in this, particular StreamYard room, which is, that the vast majority of people who have cannabis crimes on their record have, a statutory opportunity to get expungement that is pretty clear, and it's pretty hard for them to not get it. And even those folks who are left out, those 35,000 people or so, I think, as I count them at least, who were left out of that, are going to be eligible for clean slate pretty soon, provided they can stay out of trouble in the meantime. But I appreciate Josey Scoggins' point that there are people who maybe have committed some sort of what we would consider extremely minor, very, very petty crime in the interim, and then that's preventing them from having access to this clean slate opportunity, really in a way that is not in line with public policy, or even the public policy that I think the majority of legislators currently who pass clean slate would want. I do think that some of those issues, like driving with no insurance and driving with license suspended, are ones that we might be able to get an enhancement to the law to say that those don't count against your clean slate.
So let's talk about this real quick, Jeff. The first sentence of the law that we've all been praising says that for people looking to expunge multiple misdemeanors and felonies, they may do so on one application. So and I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that this is also your guys' intention, was that we could file for all things that are eligible for expungement, provided that it's been 7 years maximum since they ended the sentencing for their most recent offense, right? That we could apply for everything at one time. So when we got the forms, and the forms on there make you check a box in order to be eligible that says no other crimes have been committed between today's date and the end of my sentencing. So it prevents us from putting things that happened really any time between there. So I can't just go back to 92 and expunge a felony. If you have one other thing in front of it, I have to expunge that first, or at least that's the guidance we're getting from the Attorney General's office. Is this something that you're seeing? Does the legislature know that this is the way it is?
I certainly am not familiar with the intricacies that you're talking about, and I'd be happy to maybe spend some more time getting sort of walked through it. If maybe I can be helpful in trying to resolve it, I'd want to talk to the Attorney General's office as well. I'd want to talk to our local prosecutors and some of the defense attorneys here in Washington County that have really been in the forefront of making expungement fair opportunities available, and walking people through this very arduous process even before these laws exist that make it easier. So no, it's not something I'm currently familiar with, and I know what the law says broadly, but when you started initially talking about the forms, Josey, I was thinking, I need to get my hand on this form, right? So you look at what it is exactly you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's something we're looking for and me and Jamie keep talking about, is that there's no way that this was the intent of the law. But B, that this was something that people knew was going to happen, right? When we were promoting the clean slate bills, when we were talking about this idea of a clean slate. And it can happen. People can have like 6, 8, 10 things on their record and get them all expunged and be eligible for that. But they have to do it in layers, in a way that it requires a new application fee and a new court date, and also new fingerprints and new copies, and a variety of issues. And we're so lucky to have places like Washtenaw County who are doing above and beyond. I mean, they just had an expungement fair where they had food and games, and it wasn't an expungement fair, or was it a carnival? I don't really know, but it was awesome. And that's not something I see out here in rural Michigan. You know, I'm back out here in Niles, Buchanan, Benton Harbor area. And the expungement, the access to tools like that just isn't there. And it is shameful for us as a state to promote these as something we can do on our own. When I have 9 different attorneys on our team who don't agree with any of it, with each other. And so I think that I'm really looking forward to seeing you introduce something that solves what is, I think, a very basic issue. But the only other thing that people are really getting hung up on is getting charged with this. You can't expunge the same felony twice if it's punishable by more than 10 years, which seems pretty reasonable unless you look at the drug sentencing guidelines for the state of Michigan, which says that everything except for cannabis is punishable by up to 20 years. And so we're looking at things like if you have, let's say that your daughter gets involved in methamphetamine, which is a very big issue in rural Michigan, especially here in Cass County, and they don't ever hit you with one charge, and I know I don't have to tell you that, but let's say that she gets charged with possession of methamphetamine twice. She will never, under the current statute, be able to expunge the other charge, even if it's been 20, 30, 40 years. And so when we're looking at redemption, and the idea in Michigan is a lot like all of America, where we're rooting for the underdog. I mean, hell, we all have a Lions t-shirt in our closet, right? There's no shortage of redemption stories here in the state of Michigan, and I believe that if there's anyone that supports the idea of a second chance, I know that it's Jeff Irwin, and so I'm so glad to have you on here. And Jeff, I also wanted to say, I know that you're from a pretty conservative part of northern Michigan, right? Your dad was a legislator for a long time. He is a legend out there. What does he think about all of this progressive work that you've done?
Yeah, so a few things. One, I am originally from Sault Ste. Marie, and Sault Ste. Marie and the eastern Upper Peninsula is it's a very socially conservative area. In many ways, it's kind of the opposite politically than a lot of my neighbors here in Washtenaw County, where Washtenaw County tends to be very socially liberal and maybe a little fiscally conservative. The Upper Peninsula is almost, really kind of the opposite, socially conservative and fiscally, they like the jobs at the college or the prison or what have you, DNR, etc. So it was definitely a different sort of environment to come to here in Washtenaw County than what I grew up in. As far as what does he think of all this? It's interesting because you would think that given the way that the political spectrum has shifted so far to the right in this country, that that he might be somehow appalled by what it is I do, but I don't think so. I think partially because I'm a son, but also partially because, like I said, the fulcrum of politics in America has moved so far to the right that even people who were kind of moderate or conservative Dems back then are clearly Democrats now. And so, I mean, think about it. Think about some of the things that Richard Nixon was pushing around universal health care, Medicare. He signed Medicare. He created the EPA. The things that now seem that the right messages as being left-wing conspiracies like clean air and clean water and quality education and making sure everyone has access to healthcare. Those things were bipartisan ideals a couple generations ago, 30, 40 years ago. So I don't know, there's no issue there. But one thing I would say to go back to the meat of the discussion is that Josey, you living in those areas, I'm sorry you don't have access to these resources, but one thing you do have access to is you do have access to the legislators themselves who really I need as partners to be able to get some of these things done. And so, I would be more than happy to work with you on the details of maybe what we could do to tweak the law to make it work better and to make it work more smoothly. I think that is one of the things that we can get conservative Republican legislators to care about. both as a path to redemption, and both because, also because of its benefit to the economy, but also because of the fact that, sometimes there are things in government that aren't left or right, they're just up or down. And when it comes to paperwork and making things more difficult for people in ways that aren't really necessary, and that maybe also cause our employees in government to have to spend more time dealing with it in ways that aren't necessary, oftentimes those are the kinds of things where you can get folks to come together on it, as long as you can get folks on both sides of the aisle to see it. And you're in a position to help me get my colleagues to see it. So let's work together on what some of the details are and what we need to fix, and see if we can't get a bipartisan team working on making change.
Hey, Jeff, do you think that some of those changes could include making like the simple use and possession automatic?
It could, but I would point out to you, one of the things I guess I haven't been super clear about here is that we're kind of mixing terms, and I don't want to be sort of like pedantic about it, because maybe I don't even know what all these different terms mean, but we've been throwing around these different terms. One of the ones is clean slate. A lot of times the word clean slate, or the term clean slate, was used to refer to the whole package, but sometimes clean slate was, as I said a minute ago, kind of really just that one bill. And that one bill, the clean slate bill, is automatic. The problem is that that's not going to kick in until probably 2 years after the effective date. So probably April of 2023. It could come earlier than that, but essentially we've now deployed the funding to hire the programmers, to design the database system that's going to key into both the statewide criminal record database, but also all 83 counties plus all the district courts. So it's a sizable technology project, and that aspect of it is going to be automatic. So eventually those older possession and those older use charges are going to be eventually automatically taken off people's records, but that's going to take some time. And in the meantime, folks are stuck with the application process.
And before people call me telling me that they're going to get their records expunged automatically, which they totally will, I do want to talk about that for a minute. You can expunge stuff automatically starting in 2023 if you have no more than 2 felonies or 3 misdemeanors, which Jeff might be right, and he is usually right. So about that not including marijuana misdemeanors. You can expunge as many marijuana misdemeanors as you want. And it also includes usage, sale of paraphernalia and paraphernalia as well when we're talking about marijuana misdemeanors. And so if you know anybody that was involved in any of that stuff, we're still happy to do that. Jeff, what do you think about in terms of automatic expungements when you were talking? Was that something that you found had a lot of support in the legislature?
Well, that was one of the really tough things to get over the hill, really. There were that was one of the things that there was the most pushback about, this concept that some of these crimes would be eliminated from someone's record without a specific review. I certainly supported that, because there are just so many folks who are swept into, particularly when we start talking about that driving without insurance piece. You got hundreds of thousands of records on that, right? And so those things really, it didn't benefit the public to have someone review each one of those, and to have a judge sign off, and to have someone file paperwork on every single one of those. And that's true of a lot of other crimes as well that I saw as just extremely petty. So that was actually the possibly the most controversial element of the whole package. Was there were a number of individual, certainly individual prosecutors, individual sheriffs, and I believe even their associations who at the beginning at least were dead set against that. I'm sort of hedging on that because I don't remember how they came out in the end, because there was a tremendous amount of back and forth and negotiation about the details on these bills, which is partly how they ended up. They could have been a lot better, but I do think that the progress that we got was meaningful and was worth getting, and it's going to help a lot of folks who were caught up in particularly our bad cannabis laws, and the vast majority of them are certainly eligible in the short term to get their records cleared by application, and over the long run, a lot of folks are going to get it automatically. But as Josey points out, there is a not insignificant number of people who this isn't going to help, or whom automatic isn't going to work for. Probably some of us on this call know a number of those folks because of our involvement in the movement for reform. And it's particularly frustrating when you've got individuals who, stuck out their necks to point out how terrible these laws were and to become sort of a living example of why cannabis prohibition was ignorant. Some of those folks are not going to be able to get relief from these laws, and that's particularly frustrating.
Appreciate that. So, Josey, anything else you want to add? Because we are going longer than I thought we were going to, and I really appreciate your time here, Jeff. Are you okay for a couple more minutes?
I was going to try to get out of here pretty soon, Jamie, but I can stick with you for a couple of minutes. One thing I'll mention just to tee it up for you is while I've got the floor, and one of the other things I would encourage folks to consider communicating with their legislators about is, what we're doing with the state budget, how we're spending some of our money on some of these issues. We have an opportunity here in Michigan to take a different direction with drug policy across the board. And one of the issues I feel that we could get some bipartisan action on is to move more towards harm reduction as a public health approach to substance abuse. We know that there are folks out there who get caught into the vortex of addiction and who need help, and yet our state continues to, I feel, misinvest our dollars in approaches that are less likely to work, less likely to reach the people who need help, less likely to build trust with the individuals who need someone, to build trust with. So, reaching out to your legislators and encouraging them to, do more with medically assisted treatment, to do more with methadone clinics, to do, more with, approaches to addiction that are likely to work, rather than the approach we take now, which is, badges and guns and it's not effective.
Senator, if we were to adjust the law in order to publicly fund the district court so that they didn't make revenue from the fines and fees that you talked about earlier in this program, I mean, again, we're talking about penalizing people with poverty disproportionately from penalties that, weighed upon people with wealth. So if we wanted to take that up as a public funding thing and not rely on that source, what would that look like as far as the dollar amount goes? Any idea?
I am somewhat reluctant to throw out a number because I worry I'm going to get it horribly wrong. But I do know that just in the circuit court, so getting out of the district court realm for a second, in the circuit court, in order to replace the amount of money that is put in by fees, it would be about $200 million statewide. And so at the circuit court level, you're assigned both fines that are statutory, and then you're also assigned fees, which are, we'll call them extra statutory. I actually think that they should not be charged. I don't think that they're authorized by the law. But anyway, this has been a fight for many years in the legislature, and the courts have weighed in without going into all the nitty gritty for all the circuit courts in the state to replace the fees would be about $200 million. I suppose that the number for the district courts would be considerably larger than that. And so I don't want to hazard a guess, but I think that the jail and pretrial task force might have looked into this issue, or maybe it was there was a recent task force on court funding that I know is looking into these issues as well. So I need to go reacquaint myself with those numbers. But it's a big number. I suggest it's probably a small billion, like maybe 1 or 1.2, be my guess. Wow. Hey, I said I wasn't going to guess, and then I did.
Okay. So before you go, and not to beleaguer, let me just get right to the heart of a question. There is going to be some amendments that have to do with changing definitions of marijuana, which has to do with like housing the Delta 8 cannabinoid and its sale and all that kind of stuff under the MRTMA, ultimately. And is there any concern for further restrictions, burdens, anything like that as a result of this? Anything to be concerned about from your perspective?
Well, I mean, I guess every time I'm looking at a piece of legislation coming over from the House or coming from anywhere, really, a colleague or anywhere, there's always a certain level of concern, and I want to make sure we get it right. And so, if folks have specific concerns about some of the definitions in there and how they may be inappropriate in some way or may lead to unintended consequences, I certainly would love to hear that. I haven't heard that yet. I've looked at the legislation myself. None of that popped out at me. But certainly eager to hear from folks. If they've got concerns of that nature, I would say that if folks are going to be burning and inhaling a substance that is publicly for sale, I think there has to be some appropriate level of public health protection and therefore regulation thereof. But I want to make sure we get it right, and I'm eager to hear from folks if they think that the House has gotten it wrong, either in a very narrow way or in some broader sense. But I haven't been hearing that thus far.
So, and I'm asking about the penalty for violating this law, this change. And the reality is it's getting housed under the MRTMA, so it follows.
Digital audio in.
It then follows those consequences as they would come under that statute. Is that right?
So as I understand it, that's right. And so therefore, if you were, caught with it, it starts out as, a non-jailable misdemeanor, I think, at the most. I think in order to get beyond that, you have to be, willfully and habitually, commercially selling it. And so, I think that if I understand it correctly, and we're going to kick the tires of this as the bill goes through the Senate, what it would mean is that, it's essentially like marijuana. And so, it's something that if you do, continue to sell it without a license, and they can prove that you're done so habitually and willfully and knowingly violating the law, then eventually you can go to jail for it. But otherwise, it's a non-jailable misdemeanor.
So, and then some people may like it or not like it or be concerned about opening of the act, even though it's just specific to that one section or anything like that. But it does not create further restrictions on existing further restrictions that we need to look at or be concerned about. Is that correct?
I mean, I don't see those yet. I mean, I think that given some of the limitations of MRTMA, all of that sort of comes to bear, right? I mean, so, for instance, when we proposed and passed Proposal 1, it made cannabis broadly legal for adults 21 and over, but not for people 18 to 21, not for people under 18. And so some of those limitations come to bear. But no, I nothing's popped out at me yet. We haven't had the benefit of the committee and the opportunity to vote on it. But I've read the legislation. I saw the vote in the House. I've read it specifically with that idea of thinking like, do any of these definitions create problems in other ways? And it's not immediately apparent to me, but there is some language in there about how to define, like I think it's all isomers or something like that. That's pretty broad. But then again, I don't see a scenario in which that would be broad in a way that's inappropriate. So, but if folks feel otherwise, I'm always interested to learn more and to look at it from new angles.
Senator, two things that are really big in other states and are coming to the Michigan would be, THC driving limitations that's been tried before. I'm wondering if there's a renewed effort to try and get that going this year. And secondly would be to change the tax structure based on THC content. We've seen in other states where higher THC products would carry a higher tax level. Are we hearing any kind of rumors about those things in Lansing yet?
I haven't heard that second one. That would be a new one. If it is being bounced around, I haven't heard it. The first one, trying to create some sort of strict per se intoxication limit in Michigan, such that if you tested above a certain nanogram limit on some test, then therefore you were intoxicated and therefore driving illegally. That idea continues to come up, and I suspect it will continue to come up. Right now, I think that from what I can tell in the legislature, the science is holding that legislation back. What I mean by that, and I think everybody on this call knows that, is that the science just does not support the idea that someone with a particular nanogram reading on these tests is intoxicated. There are people who are intoxicated at that level, and there are people who are not. And so it's just not reliably connected. These numbers are not reliably connected to people's impairment. And so as a result, I think that these kinds of bills, which continue to come up like a bad penny, have been beaten back in Michigan. I think many of you may know there was a report done by the Michigan State Police on this very issue, and their report said something very similar to what I just said. And so, I think so far that's been holding these kinds of ideas back. But these ideas are enacted into law in other states, and I don't know, because I'm not maybe connected enough to people in, say, Colorado, but I don't know if these laws are starting to create big problems for people who are habitual users. But I know that, for instance, when we were looking at these issues back when we were dealing with a medical law here in Michigan, and we didn't have an adult use law yet, there were some studies that I looked at, that showed that people who were regular medical users were walking around at all times with more than 5 nanograms, even if they hadn't used recently. And so
guilty.
I don't think any of us would survive that standard, and we might be stone cold sober too. So, is there anything you'd like to leave us with, Jeff? Definitely, acknowledge or point to where people could donate again, before you leave. But any message or anything else you'd like to make sure you get in before we wrap this up?
Yeah, sure. Appreciate the opportunity for the plug. Anybody who wants to support can go to irwinforsenate.com and follow the link to donate there. I guess I would just say what I often say, and when I end these conversations with many of my friends who are on this call in drug policy reform, which is, please keep building relationships with your lawmakers. Build relationships, to the extent you can, with your city council members and your mayors. Build relationships with your prosecutors or your judges. Make sure that they know who you are and what it is you want them to do. I think earlier someone brought up the idea of asking questions about municipal approvals, and that's an important question. Why is it that so many communities in Michigan are saying no to allowing cannabis businesses in their vicinities? Part of it is because the people who are on these city councils, the people who are on these township boards, they tend to be a little older. They tend to be a little more conservative, and maybe they're not hearing from their residents who would like to shop in their area, or who would like to open a business in their area, who would like to employ people in their area, who would like to contribute to the tax base of their area, who maybe are sick of driving to the neighboring community and spending their dollars there and contributing to the tax base in that community. They need to hear that. If they never hear that from anyone, if they never hear from a customer or a prospective business owner in their area, then it's not likely that they're going to change their mind. So, I just would encourage folks to reach out to their decision makers, let them know what you think. And if they don't agree with you, I think it's best to just, continue to respectfully build that relationship and ask those questions. And you'd be surprised. I mean, I've seen a lot of folks, particularly on this issue of cannabis law reform, change their stance over the course of the last 10 or 20 years. A lot of folks who were hardened opponents, come around to the idea over time. Sometimes it's because someone close to them, experiences an illness and finds relief from cannabis. Sometimes it's because they actually see that legalization isn't causing problems in their neighboring community. Sometimes it's that they see their neighboring community getting hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue from their legal and licensed cannabis retail facilities. Sometimes it's they realize that busting people for this is a huge mistake. However they get there, it doesn't matter, but they'll get there more easily if you ask them to get there and you build a relationship with them and you let them know what you think and why.
Right on. Well, with that, I appreciate it, and we're going to help to see you through the next term, 2022. You know what? I'm sorry. I know you're going to go, but in terms of what 2022 means with the redistricting and stuff like that, more favorable or less favorable to get a significantly different composition, a better composition of lawmakers in Lansing for this issue, for example?
Yeah, well, I will say that it's always hard to say how these things will come out, but I think that it is hard to imagine a scenario where the maps will not produce a more democratic and likely more progressive legislature, which means in general for cannabis law reform issues, that's good. And I think, as all of you who've been watching these issues for a long time know, there have been Republican and conservative champions on these issues. Not all Democrats are good on these issues, but in general, Democrats having gavels in their hands and being in leadership positions and having more members in the chamber is going to be good for these issues. And the reason why I say it's only going to get more progressive in the next cycle is because these maps that we're existing on now and that they're drawn specifically to benefit the Republicans. I mean, they had the benefit of great data, great computers, and they were able to draw the maps just so to try to exact maximum advantage. And these new maps, even if they are not drawn in a way to advance Democrats, I don't think they're going to be drawn in a way where they really strain to find ways to benefit the Republican Party like the current maps are. And so we won't know for many months how much better they are, but I don't see a scenario in which they don't get at least a little better.
One more question from Jenny, and then we'll wrap it up.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt. I just wanted to know, Mr. Irwin, if you were familiar with what's going on in our local municipalities when it comes to caregivers, not recreational establishments or business, but essentially municipalities right now are passing ordinances that ban or restrict caregivers to the point where they couldn't even have a 72 plant grow for their patients. And this is happening everywhere. I have been fighting Flushing Township since February, and now just last night I was on a Zoom meeting with the trustees of Clinton Township, and they are going to pass one. I mean, they're actually trying to say that you would have 55 square feet to grow and dry your product. I mean, that wouldn't even be enough for one person. And basically what they're doing is they're stomping all over the MMMA. And I would just like to know if there is anything we can do about it. If you can let other, legislators know what's going on, because this should not be happening. They are completely hindering a patient's access to their medication, to an affordable medication. They are doing this by trying to call a caregiver a home occupation, a business, and they're not. They can only have up to 6 people they can grow for, obviously, including themselves, 72 plants. I mean, that's not a business. They can't even pay taxes. So my question is, what can we do?
All right, Jeff, and you know about the DeRuyter and leaving open what's reasonable. Okay, so that's what's going on.
Yep, no, I get it, and this is a big conversation, and I'd be happy to have it in a more thorough way at another time, because I actually am getting to my limit here. However, I will say a few things about it. One, I agree with you. It seems to me like these ordinances violate the MMMA. I don't know how they're getting away with them. Then again, the DeRuyter decision seemed to me to be out of line with the MMMA. And when I read it, I'm not remembering all the facts because it was a while ago now, but it seemed to me that maybe this was a case where bad facts make bad law. And, part of the problem here is that we haven't had the benefit of a case go up to the state Supreme Court or the state Court of Appeals where the caregiver, had a very sort of compelling set of facts to be able to argue this point, that these ordinances are contrary to the MMMA, which they shouldn't be allowed to operate in such a way. So I think that's part of it. Educating lawmakers, could be part of it. But of course, the law already says a number of things that are the MMMA, which the legislators can't amend except for with a 3/4 majority, already says a number of things that seem to be directly in conflict with these ordinances. I think that what complicates this fact is that there are a lot of people who are operating under the caregiver law who are running operations that are hard to distinguish from a home-based business. And that draws, a lot of attention, that draws a lot of complaints, that draws a lot of impetus for these local officials to feel like, well, they got to do something. And so they pass these ordinances, which once again, I would agree with you, are contrary to, the state law. But some of that has to go through the courts. We need to get some rulings that, demonstrate that there's a limit to how far these ordinances can go. And I'd want to reread DeRuyter to sort of give myself a little bit more of a ledge to push off of here. But I think that if I remember correctly, DeRuyter didn't authorize all of these different things, right? It just kind of broadly opened the door for it. And so, like, for instance, just to get into the detail for one moment before I run away quickly, is that, like, in the MMA, I believe it's very clear in saying that you can't allow anyone else to have access to your grow. And, people have gone to jail over that issue, right? And now all of a sudden, local ordinances can mandate that you give access to your grow, even though state law prevents it, and I can go to jail if I violate that state law. It doesn't seem right. So anyway, big conversation, important issue. I'd love to have a more helpful answer than I do, but I think this has to be fought out because I just think these local units are overstepping the law.
Municipal League and Township Association.
Yeah, thank you, Senator.
Municipal League and Township Association helping to kind of push the envelope. This seems to be kind of a pattern too with those guys on this issue. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it. A lot of people are saying that after your next term, we should be thinking about the next step and running for
Governor.
But, the next step is just to do a great job, tomorrow, and keep trying to be good to our neighbors and serve our families and our communities the best we can. So I appreciate you guys having me on, and all the efforts that so many of you have put into making this change that we've seen here in Michigan that we've enjoyed for the last couple of years. It's one of the reasons why I'm so happy to come on here and spend so much time with all of you, is because I miss a lot of you from going back several years ago when a lot of us were really at the point of the spear on making change here in Michigan that a lot of people are benefiting from. And so there'll continue to be problems to solve, there'll continue to be issues to be resolved, but it is great to see so many folks who were a part of that struggle to make these the problems we're focusing on, rather than achieving that first basic victory of legalization.
Thank you very much. And again, thank you for so much time, and we will definitely have you back on soon. Thank you.
Yep, what a great segment with a great guy, Senator Irwin. We've known him since he was Rep. Irwin. Jim Salame, I think he's your senator, isn't that correct, sir?
He was my rep. He's my senator. He's been the hero, the champion. We've been saying that for a decade now for the cannabis movement.
Just gave us an hour.
Yeah.
Time. A lot of great content.
Yeah.
Let people know what he's about.
Generous, and he's helping the empty.